侍の儀式を執り行うでござる。拙者が上人となる日は近い。
And yet, you're probably still gonna get upstaged by Boruto's dad. We continued this little series with the 12 Sword Eyes organizing a little offline meet at the ritual grounds to release the powers of the Sword of Judgment. To do so, they would need to generate energy by battling with their corresponding colors, which brought up the little issue that Tsurugi had both red eyes. Just do what Luke does. Legit, one of my favorite duels from that series. Actually, they would later just have Bringer temporarily take the Eye of Darkness, and Tsurugi would deconstruct his deck back into 2 decks in order for his droid buddy to act as a bit of a proxy. A rather clever idea that built off of established lore with these characters. Speaking of which, before the meeting, Hakuo took the two to Vargas's castle, having realized that Gyarados had to have lived there with his brother at some point. Tsurugi, being the curious protagonist he was, wanted to learn about the big bad of their show, realizing that part of the reason he went full Aizen was because he saw the slow downfall of his brother to the other nations. And of course, with this show's whole theme around brothers, he was also concerned the same thing might happen to Yaiba at some point, especially with what was about to go down. And sure enough, much like many Sunrise productions, a bunch of flying ships took to the skies. Yeah, rather smartly, Yaiba had actually created several arcs to accommodate the large populations of multiple continents. He also started communicating with the rulers of each continent and explained his motivations and reasonings for building all of them in secret, as we previously said, he wanted to avoid any unnecessary uproar that might come from telling everyone that the apocalypse is coming. He also didn't mind being slandered as a tyrant, as at least that also resulted in all the other nations trying to join together against him. It's good stuff showing that while Yaiba's plans certainly weren't perfect, and he definitely did overdo it at times, he at least had the resolve to see it through to the end. Meanwhile, the other Sword Eyes were doing their parts, like helping the evacuation through Kizakura's company's connections, and Hagakure getting all of the ninja villages to come together, which thankfully didn't involve entire nations. And Gordy tried to slowly get his town to start packing after some rice bowls.
Are you winning, son?
Nah, of course, he was clearly trying to break the tension by being a bit of a clown, as, people were understandably a little on edge due to all this. Back with Yaiba and his console, they got a visit from Tachibana, who could bring more to the table when he wasn't in the sheep suit. He was there to correctly point out that not everyone was willing to or even believed in his plans. This of course included that one worker whose whole role in the show seems to be to play devil's advocate. But yeah, as he had predicted, there were understandably stupid people out there who did believe in the oncoming apocalypse in spite of the massive amount of evidence, and even if they did, they also didn't trust Yaiba enough to lead them to the promised land, and maybe even believed that the Lord Almighty might show mercy to them if they cooperated. Rather ironically, they kind of echoed the sentiments they had when the Eyes of Light tried to overthrow Yaiba, but now there was an even more oppressive force than him. The older we get, the more we realize that sort of politics will never go away. Rao suggested that they could just use his powers to silence any detractors, which, might seem a little extreme, but in this sort of situation, it might not be unwarranted. But Yaiba actually didn't mind the critics. Yeah, after a whole season where he was pretty legit oppressive, he did actually want to unify the people now that the prep work for his arcs were done. This is likely because he did want a genuine union now, much like the rebels he took down, now that he was staging his own coup against God. Again, there's really not much to say here other than that it's good writing showing the progression of Yaiba as a leader, even though there is going to be some issues with his plans that we'll get into next time. Likewise, Tsurugi had developed beyond being the younger sibling who originally wanted to rebel against his big brother by acquiring the Sword of Judgment before him, and yet through talking to him and understanding his nuanced goals, he was now all in on helping him get the blade to slay God and create a world where people could decide their own destinies. With that, they arrived at the sacred grounds and began the Sword of Judgment ritual, and in case you're wondering, this was the Eyes of Light versus Darkness battles that the opening was hinting at, and it was kind of disappointing. First and foremost, because it was 6 simultaneous battles, we'd only see bits and pieces of each over the course of the last part of this episode and halfway into the next. As a result, we'd also only see the conclusions to 2 of them. Second, these weren't exactly intense rivalry battles. In fact, as Kizakura put it, these were very casual battles where who won was irrelevant, as they just needed to generate enough energy to unseal the sword. And yet, conversely, I would say this is also one of the best parts of the episode. Sure, it wasn't exactly what we were expecting, but it is also nice to see that the conflict between the Sword Eyes themselves has mostly been resolved to the point that they can just have these fun little battles. They were still taking it seriously in the sense that they needed to have good battles to charge up the sword, but they did also have some wiggle room for some of your typical card game banter. Is that what the Zero system is telling you to do, Hero? But yeah, there were some very nice and wholesome little interactions, like Amarello promising that she'd try some of Kizakura's sweets later, Sora and Brow flexing on each other in more than one way, and Rivalry acknowledging that he loved having his brother back in perfect form, which I guess does act as a bit of closure to his whole arc of being obsessed with perfection, if he could accept his brother in whatever form he took. Their battle was also one that we actually saw the conclusion to, with Soul taking the win, while the other was Tsurugi versus Bringer, with the former taking it mostly thanks to the fact that he had 3 different shiny dragons to work with. Yeah, as cool as the Dark Red deck was, Bringer kind of got the short end, as he only had 1 Ace Spirit versus Tsurugi's 3. But again, winners didn't really matter here, as each battle unlocked a little bit more of the Sword of Judgment until it was fully released. With that, the Sword Eyes tried to claim their prize, but... Okay, who turned on the falling armor mod? Nah, of course, it was Gardos, who, in a rather devious tactic, distracted Yaiba by first attacking Tsurugi, giving him enough time to take the sword. Yeah, the one time he decided to be a good big brother, it might have cost them the world. With that, he merged with the sword to acquire his true final boss form, and sided with God and his tool of judgment. Yeah, come on, you gotta give everyone at least a 3-day warning. With that, the Sword Eyes were forced to retreat, and Gardos enacted his personal Order 66 on the Stinger droids. They suspended the boarding of the arcs, and as usual, he used his silver tongue to make it look like it was all Yaiba's doing. And to make himself look even better, he used his powers to stop an erupting volcano by turning it into a card. Okay, that's a pretty epic way of getting a final boss monster. With that, the episode ended with the Sword Eyes waking up in Sora's workshop, having been rescued by the messengers, who, after seeing how much cheating God and Gardos were doing, decided to rebel against him as they entered into the final battles of the series. These 2 episodes were a good example of how to do a calm before the storm, and then bring in the actual storm. While not exactly the big epic showdowns that the opening kind of hinted at, the battles between the Sword Eyes were actually rather wholesome, and could be seen as a sign that the characters wanted to move on from all of their conflicts just as soon as they defeated a god or 2. It also really highlighted the development of each of the characters, especially of course the brothers. As any fantasy series winds down, whether it be in anime or game form, we do like to see it when characters who have gone through arcs to be able to find comfort as their conflicts are dying down. For the Sword Eyes, and especially the ones of Darkness, it is honestly satisfying to see them chilling out and even starting to befriend their counterparts. Yeah, it would have been nice to see a few more interactions between them so that they could build up to a true final battle, but they just didn't interact that much, except for the Purple Brothers. You could blame that on Tsurugi kind of flexing his position as the main character, but it's not that big a deal, and these more casual battles were meant to be more of the calm before the storm, which Gardos certainly brought down with him and his moon, which again, there's that Gurren Lagann comparison. But yeah, as a villain, it is awesome to see him take advantage of the heroes, and ultimately come out on top by gaining the sword and also starting to win over the people due to the understandable trepidations they had towards trusting Yaiba's plans. I'll say right now that we are going to get some great final battles out of this, but for now, these were good episodes to build towards them. While the Sword Eyes managed to work out their differences with each other, they still need to deal with their differences with a higher plane. Thank you for watching these videos that we are going to try to release on Tuesdays from now on, just to make room for the Wednesday videos. Yeah, Acrotrip will now take up Wednesdays, while Monkey Lumiere will take Fridays. It's actually much easier of a schedule than last season, where we had shows to review on the weekend when I actually kind of want to relax. Still, look forward to that, and more. Until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and Yeah, of course the moon would start coming down. Well, down to the basement with me like a good little otaku.